This is The Covered Call, the podcast where we explore the journey towards true freedom. This is Jason, and as always, I'm joined by my good mate Lovis.
With each episode, we dive into the stories, strategies, and mindsets of those who have broken free from the conventional path. Whether it be astute investments, entrepreneurship, or high leverage opportunities, this show is about more than just making money.
It's about us pursuing a life on our own terms. If you're driven by purpose and keen to explore your untapped potential, you might just be at the right place. Let's chart a course towards more freedom, more contentment, and more impact together.
Welcome to another episode of The Covered Call. In today's episode, we dive deep into the theme of freedom and flexibility in life. We'll be discussing the experiences of living in different countries and what drives the decision to move from one place to another. Florian shares his journey from Germany to Singapore, Australia, and eventually Cyprus, and how having a flexible lifestyle and location-independent income made those transitions easier. We'll also explore the benefits of holding multiple passports and the unique freedom that brings. But it's not all smooth sailing. We reflect on the challenges, the mistakes, and the valuable lessons learned along the way. We'll talk about the significance of money, not as an end goal, but as a means to buy time and freedom. Florian shares insights from his current project, Forgd, which aims to support crypto startups. And throughout, we emphasize the importance of setting long-term goals, staying present, and making decisions that prioritize flexibility and quality of life over status. If you're interested in taking calculated risks and designing a life that's truly your own, this episode is for you. Let's get started.
So, are you in Cyprus at the moment?
Yes, sir.
So, I totally understand what you mean now when you tell me about the heat. Because I think at least you got AC, right? I don't have AC in Leipzig. And although I come from the tropics, I've always had either a swimming pool or air conditioning, right? And right now I have neither.
Yeah, it's a total new thing. I always feel like when you're heating, Germany at least, you feel like you just have to. There's no option. In the winter, you just have to heat. You can't skimp on heating. But here, you're always like, okay, let's wait until at least 1 or 2 p.m. and then turn on the aircon. Because before that, like the sun's not hammering in from the main side, so it's not too bad. Throwing that overboard now, and aircon is on from like 10 a.m. roughly. Otherwise, my t-shirt would be completely wet right now.
How did you do it when you were living in Singapore? Did you and Vicky have the aircon on all day? Or was it just...
Well, no, we didn't. And at first we tried to sleep in the night without aircon, keeping the windows open for a couple of nights, which was crazy, right? Because in Singapore, like the roads, there's no point where there's no cars driving. And we were living in Bugis.
Right.
So it's quite busy. But in Singapore, I feel like Singapore is used to it. They have it every day, and it has infrastructure for being hot. So especially in Singapore, I read this tweet from Levels.io, who's built like a couple of AI companies. Follow him on Twitter, right? And he's been like, Bangkok is just built for heat, right? It has all these malls, and indoor they're super nice, and they're all interconnected. So you can go from mall to mall to mall without ever going into the heat once. And Vicky and I were always joking that if we go out, we need to take a jumper, because most of the times we're spending indoors, and we need a jumper because otherwise AC is going to be too cold. But here it's not that way, and that's the problem, right? There's almost nothing you can do. There's one mall, it's tiny, there's no playground, nothing at all. So it's like Vicky goes there, eye rolling once a week. Is like, oh, it's so fucking boring. I'll just walk up and down until Noah falls asleep, and then they have a little cafe and go back home. That's the worst.
I'm going to text
Whereas
her.
in Singapore, you can spend the whole day indoor. Yeah, please tell her.
I'll be like, hey, how good is Ion right now?
Yeah.
So Ion's this massive mall in Singapore, like shoppers district, and it's connected to Takashimaya and all the, like, you can walk. How long do you reckon you can walk for a flow, like in a straight line?
I think you can walk all day. You can just walk all day, and then you get an MRT access, and then you can go with the MRT to Sun City or to Marina Bay Sands Mall, everywhere, right? You never have to go out. And there's
Yeah.
never a moment where you're in the heat, unless you go out of where you live, right? Where you
Yeah.
live, it probably stops. Then you have to have like a little bit of outside time.
Yeah. I live in a little village north of the city.
Rural Singapore.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Flo, maybe I'm missing a few chapters, but from what I understand, you come from no, you've moved from WBB to Canada, or did you move to WBB after Canada?
After Canada.
Okay,
Canada, we just lived for 2 years.
and how old
And
were
I was
you
a kid
when
then.
that happened?
7, 8, 9. I started school there.
Okay, in which
Yeah.
part of
And then
Canada?
after that, we left again in Nanaimo, Vancouver Island in British Columbia.
Super nice area, right?
Yeah. I've never been back since, so memory from me being a 9-year-old aren't that strong anymore. But from what the photos and what I can remember, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Maybe you should go back, just check it out.
Yeah.
Might give you
I'd
some.
love to, but yeah, there's just so many countries.
And it's pretty
Check
far
out.
away, right?
Well, not like from Germany. It'd actually be like a close thing. I don't know how many hours, but you'd fly to I don't know, somewhere like Chicago to a stopover, or you can have direct flights to Vancouver. How much is that? 12 hours?
Yeah. I think I did that for that
That's a
seminar
short
2
flight
years ago.
compared to Sydney.
Yeah. And you were there because your dad was working there?
Yeah. Dad was working there. It was interesting. They just said, we want to try out something. So it's sort of like us taking the risk here with Cyprus or similar. But they just packed up and moved there and tried it out. Like they sold their house. They had like a whole shipping container with all the stuff going there. They bought a house there. My dad didn't even have a job when he got there.
Wow.
And so it's a pretty risky thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but cool. I think to try it out. I think there's lots of things you learn when you do that. And they just did. So everything I do seems like easy compared to that, right? Like I already have a job.
Siblings
income.
at the time also?
I did. I have 2 siblings. So we're like 3 kids. Them moving there with like all of that stuff, not knowing exactly where to move. The most interesting thing, I guess, is like when we first moved, that was like in 2017 to Singapore, or 2018. You could do like WhatsApp video calls or Skype calls, and it's just cheap or free. In when was that? 1997 or so. There's nothing. No video calls. You could do an international phone call, but it costs you an arm and a leg. So I think it was much harder. So you see your family maybe twice a year when you visit each other, but other than that, you don't, right? And nowadays, my wife calls her mom and dad every day with Charlotte and Noah.
Yeah.
So
different.
it's like
easier.
Super different.
It's traveling to the corners of the earth version light, right? Feels like.
Yeah.
And you can, and I guess if you decide that it's too much and you want to change your decision and head back home, might be actually cheaper or easier today as well, right? Compared to back in the day.
Yeah.
Just with jobs and
I think back in the day, yeah. Like, and with the whole internet thing, I can't even imagine how it was back then. You researching things like how to get a work permit. Now you just Google it and there's 1,000 different blogs and people telling you how to do it. Or now you can even get ChatGPT to create you a summary of what the exact steps are that you need to be done, consolidating all these blogs into one little piece of information that you have to read, right? And back then it was, I don't even know. You just call people, go, I don't know, travel
make an
agency,
appointment at the embassy or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, that you have to do for a lot of cases, right? If you want a long-term visa.
Yeah, but to even find out what's required, I guess, you'd go pick up a pamphlet or something.
Yeah. And you can't even call someone in that country, where that's even harder because it's also going to cost a lot of money. And the whole infrastructure to get that done is also not there, I guess, or that easily. Yeah, much easier now.
So like for all 3 of us, right, we've all kind of been born somewhere and then lived somewhere else and then traveled around, right? I think we have that in common. And when I was growing up, I always thought that was the way it was for everyone, you know. And so when I first said, "Oh, I wanted to go move overseas," it was the first time that I realized it's that the way I was looking at things was different from everyone else's, right? Like everyone's like, "Oh, why do you want to leave Singapore? You got a spot in the Singapore uni, right? Why would you want to go?" The only people that leave Singapore are those that can't get into the local unis and they need to pay for a spot overseas, right? But for me, it was like a no-brainer, and I was like, yeah, but if I stay here, I won't get to see what's life like on the outside, right? And I don't know, for you guys, would you say your early experiences and also maybe looking at your parents, would that be something that helped you to make those decisions to move, or do you think you would have just stayed back at home if you never had that as a part of your foundational life experience when you were young?
I definitely think it helps. Like if you have someone that has shown you that it can be done,
Mm-hmm.
definitely makes it a lot easier. It'd be interesting to see a study, right, in terms of those where the parents have never left. Do the kids ever leave? And those where the parents have left and moved around, are the kids more likely to then do the same?
Yeah,
I would say there is some sort of correlation there.
yeah. I feel like there is too, and also I don't know. Both of you are Germans, right? But for me, I'm like the son of a Singaporean Chinese mom and a Aussie. My grandpa was born in Yorkshire, right? So it's just you just in your head, everyone's moved, you know. Like nobody in your
Yeah.
whole family tree from where they're living at, right? And so the idea of moving isn't so foreign. But then when I moved over here to Europe, it hit me, right? Like, oh, I had a girlfriend from Norway, right? And there was a big issue about, oh, where should we live? And she, it took a while for me to realize, oh, she would never leave Norway, right? And for me, it was also another realization that, oh my God, I don't know how many generations she would go back. Maybe her great granddad was a Viking, right? Most probably. And so to expect that
Scary.
she'd be the first one in that, I don't know how many tens of generations, right, to be the one to leave. Why? Why would that person do that? So
You're like the Norwegians or the Vikings. They were just satiated from traveling. They just did
they
all of
just
their
live
travel back then, and they were like, just okay, let's just rest for a couple of centuries.
it's like we could finally be warm
They
while
work pretty hard to
looking.
bring all the good stuff back with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And they finally figured out how to be
Planting their
warm.
seeds here and there. Yeah, yeah,
So why leave now, right?
yeah. But it's interesting. I feel the same almost. In Germany, it's sometimes even that way that some people, they don't know exactly where their grandparents used to live, right? Because that's never like a big topic because they might come from the neighboring town. So it's not something that they would ever bring up or never talk about much. But whereas with your dad, right, I'm sure you would have mentioned that his dad was from the UK or that your mom's from China or her parents, right? So
Yeah.
if you do these bigger moves, it
Yeah.
would be more of a topic that you talk about. And I feel like in Germany, or in these places where they don't move much, it's not even talked about.
Yeah, I guess you don't really bring it up in conversation. Hey, that time when great grandpa moved from Hamburg to Hanover, right?
Yeah. Or not even that. It would be like moved the 5 kilometers from the town south to the town north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just whatever.
Okay, so then
That town wasn't even called that way back then or something.
and so then after Canada, you guys moved to WBB, right? So what does WBB stand for?
Waldbreitbach, the forest wide Creek.
Yeah, the first time I met
And that tells it
Flo
all, you know.
in
It's a
Singapore, and he told me that like I couldn't speak any German at all. So ever since then, it was always WBB for us. So I was like, there's no way I can pronounce that.
Breitbach. It's a nice town, you know. It's got this nice river. It's in a valley. It's got lots of forest. It's kind of cool, you know, like a typical German town, I'd say. And we had friends over this year when we visited from Barcelona and Genoa. They're also Australians. We know them from Australia, and so they came over and visited us, and they loved it for 3 days. You know, they were there on they said super nice for a holiday. I would stay here for a week, maybe like that, right? But then living is always a different thing. Like I'd probably go on a holiday to Cyprus for 2 weeks, but living is a different thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it was quite interesting because I thought when we were organizing this recording, I was like, oh, we're going to have to find some crazy time again because Germany, Australia, whatever. And then Jason's like, no, he's no longer in Australia. And so it's kind of how did that happen? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so sometime after living in Bad Breitbach, we moved to Singapore. And then shortly after living in Singapore, I moved there with my former employer, SAP. And they then had a job in Australia. And I was like, yeah, cool, I'll try that out. And they moved me there. And it was all this easy stuff, right? So if I think about my dad doing it the hard way, or my mom and my dad doing it the hard way, I was really this super easy thing. So we had moved to Singapore, and then 4 months in, they say hey, we would like you to be in Australia. Let me stay here until the end of the year. And I said, okay. And then they paid for the container. They sent us there for a little trip to check out Sydney, because that's where we wanted to move. All these other things were sort of done for, all the visa, immigration, everything, just taken care.
They paid for you to have a trip to scout it out.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they did that in Singapore as well. So Vicky and I went there for 6 days to Singapore and just paid for the hotel, they even paid for a person during that time to take us around and show us Singapore.
That is amazing. I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. So they really pre-selling it to you, right?
Yeah. Okay. Pre-selling and then doing everything for you. There's nothing you have to worry about. Of course, you have to go through all the bureaucracy, providing all the documents, but it's easy to get it done, right? And so, we lived in Australia for a couple of years, had one child, had 2 kids, and got our permanent residentship in Australia. And then in Australia, it works that way. If you've been there for 4 years and then you stayed for another year, you're eligible to apply for citizenship. And then, we had to wait a long, long time for the German authorities to give us the green light to keep our German passport and have the Australian one, called the Beibehaltungserklärung. It's endless process. You need lawyers. Not anymore. They just abolished that rule, and now everybody can have 2 passports. But we had to go through the whole process. So,
Lovis, really? So everyone can have 2 passports in Germany now?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's official law since June or so. Yeah.
Okay.
2 or more. I don't know if it's limited to 2, but you can you can have 2.
It was always Germany that required you to, if you wanted a different one, they're like, well, then give up this one, right? Which I always thought in a way it makes sense, but I also think, of course, prefer that it's more liberal this way. I mean, my kids now have both, right? Because through birth they have both citizenships, so then it's okay. So it's really, it only applies to people that weren't born with both. And so then it becomes a whole thing. I don't know. So I think it's good. It makes it simpler this way.
Yeah. Yeah. And why not, right? Maybe someday I'll decide to move back to Germany and I'll be a potential future taxpayer.
Well, so that's the thing, right? So this might actually be an evil plot where they're trying to make it like the US. Because in the US, if you're a citizen, you're liable for taxes there no matter where you live.
Yes.
Right? So, of course, Germany can't do that if they take your passport away. So they're like, no, keep it.
Keep it. Well, I'll happily give it up in that case.
Yeah. Exactly.
But so we got that passport, and then we love Australia. It feels like our home, our or maybe like second home. We still love Germany for our family that lives there. But I guess if they would live in Australia, we'd never have a reason to really go back. Maybe for some food that's there once in a while. But yeah. So we got the passport, and then after that, we kind of thought like, hey, maybe we'll move a bit closer to the family for some time. And maybe also combine that with moving somewhere with lower taxes. And then we kind of just checked the map of countries that we could go to and went through a huge list of all these countries. So we looked at Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia because we love Bali. And we looked at like all these other different places like Panama and Costa Rica. And we just started like this decision matrix of where do you have good taxes? Where do you have potential school systems? Where do we feel safe? What's the weather and the temperature like and the climate? And how close is it actually to Germany? How are the healthcare system there? And we kind of thought like Cyprus looked all right. It 4 hours from Germany. It's got a very low tax system. It's one of the safest countries in Europe. It's got a good healthcare system. And it seemed pretty cheap from outside. And it was also easy to get in, right? You just set up a company here, make yourself an employee, and then you get this residence certificate. You pay social insurance, and you're done. That's it. You have to rent an apartment. And that's all. Then you move to Cyprus. And then we just booked a one-way ticket, flew over. You get an Airbnb for a couple of weeks and scout out the area. And then we rented a place. It's actually quite easy, right? If you think about it. But yeah. A lot of the prerequisites have to be in place. Right? You have to have, like if you start from a house. So before we moved to Cyprus, right, we were basically living in a bus, in a converted school bus. And so we didn't own much, right? So everything we owned we were able to pack in like 5 or 6 suitcases. And so we were living in that way for at least a year or half a year to a year then. And that makes it easier, right? If you have your whole house to sell and empty, it doesn't work, right? Because I think if you're like me, you're not rich, you'll have to you have to get rid of your apartment in the place you're leaving and then leave, because otherwise you just can't afford paying 2 apartments. Yeah.
I can attest to whatever Florian is saying. It's actually true. Like I've had many conversations with him while he was on his Starlink connection somewhere far away from everywhere with 1,000 crickets in the background trying to drown out his voice. I saw he was sending me pictures of him renovating the bus and getting it ready for his mega trip with his young daughter and his pregnant wife. So it's legit. This guy's really doing what he said. It's quite inspiring. I actually was, with me and my wife, we've got 2 young kids, and I've always wanted to do a trip like that, right? And the difference between me and Flo is I think about it and talk about it, but Flo just goes out and does it. So very, very inspiring. Right?
What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I actually want to ask you, right? Like what is it that makes you just go out and do it, right? Because the way you just described how you put everything together to move to Cyprus, I think that I've met people that are in their 40s with no family, with no job, with some savings, talking about doing something like that, and they don't manage to do it, right? They don't even manage to say, yeah, I'm going to go leave Germany for 3 months to go do that dream trip around Greece. And they've got the money, they've got the time, but they don't do it, right? And it's not. I think it'd be interesting to dig around and to find out why people don't get over that barrier, because it's not about knowledge, right? The amount of knowledge that you could have gotten Googling, doing your research would be the same as someone here, but So what makes you just jump in?
It's an interesting question, right? Yeah, I don't know. I think like for the moving around part, I think what you need is kind of your life to be geared up to be flexible. And that's something that's been on my radar for, I don't know, the last 5 to 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
is gearing myself to not own too many things, to having a job that's location independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to the office. I started that when I was working for SAP, right? They said, oh, you got to move to Waldorf to work here. I'm like, okay, I'll get an apartment there. I got a really nice job at the company, right? It was a prestigious German company, well paying, all that stuff. So I moved there. But then I quickly figured out that you actually don't have to be there, and you never have to go to the office except for maybe like once or twice a week. So then quickly moved away again, moved to a cheaper place that was like easier for me to travel around between clients and yeah, not live in that town. And so that's where I think it started, this idea of like being flexible, where you work from, where you get your income from, these kind of things. Yeah, when we then moved to Australia, we kind of did the same, right? We moved like just too far from the office. It was a pain to go to the office because it would take me an hour. So I never did it. I would go to the office once in a while, and then I would only go like I would get into the bus at like a stupid time, like 11 a.m., and then stay there for 3 hours and then go back home once a month maybe. And yeah, like it ended up in that situation where SAP got a new office in Sydney, and the only time I only went there was to bring back my computer when I resigned.
So
And
what
yeah,
made you?
I think like
What made you do
that's the
that,
one
Flo?
thing, is right, to be that flexible.
What made you? What? But what? Okay, so you had the blueprint. So when you're setting your life up, you know the, let's say, the grand plan is to be flexible, right? To be location independent if possible. It's all on a scale, right? So the closer towards being as location independent as possible is a good thing. And I guess in terms of finances, it's the same, right? Like the quicker you get to this stage where you're financially not as burdened, then you also have more degrees of freedom. So you mentioned you don't want to own too many things. I guess you also mean you don't want to get into too much debt, right? Because then you're forced to
Yes.
continue to work, maybe if even if you had lost interest, right, in the job. So
Yeah.
in this case, you said you resigned. So something must have pushed you over the edge, but at the same time, you had the option to resign, right? Like if you were in your gills, up to your gills in debt, then you wouldn't. You would probably say, "Yeah, I hate this job, but I have to keep doing that," right? Because you didn't resign and jump into another
Yeah.
paid job, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, I jumped into starting a business, right? And I think, yeah, it's that same flexibility, like you mentioned, but on the financial side. So you have that flexibility maybe on the stuff that you own, but then also on the financial obligations, I'd call it, right? So, or I'd call it fuck you money, but it's not really what people think that is, right? I think that the term is like coined by Taleb, and he's like ultra wealthy. So for him, it's something different. But I think for normal people, you can also have that by having maybe a year's worth of salaries on the side, or it can be less than that. Maybe it's 3 months, whatever. But like for some people, they don't even have that amount of money to just quit their
Mm.
jobs. They can't, right? Because they have too much else going on that they have to pay for. It could be their rent, or it could be their mortgage. But yeah, if you have a couple of months, years, whatever worth of savings, then you're flexible. You can say, I'm just going to stop now and try out something for half a year and see if it works. And then if it doesn't, you can still go back and find a job. And the flexibility here applies again, right? Because you could go and find a job that isn't going to pay you $400,000, but it's only going to pay you 150. But that's still fine, right? Because that's just going to maybe increase the runway a little bit again, because you're getting something in the door, right? So yeah, that financial flexibility is definitely also something that helps with this.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Lifestyle choices are also
The
really
cool
important,
thing,
right?
oh yeah,
yeah, I think the ability to have the time and space to deliberate what you want to do and then choose, right, makes your choice also that much more powerful. So like if you're not like, oh, I need
Yeah.
this job to start on the 15th because otherwise on the 26th I'm insolvent, then you're under so much pressure to you'll take whatever is offered, right?
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
actually I'm working with two people right now in my little company. One of them is not my employee, but I found him and my client hired him, and the other guy is my latest employee. And both of them have basically told me that, like, yeah, the money is nice, but they don't really care that much. They really care about the work, right? They just love being involved with a fun, interesting project that can go places. And basically, because there's enough money for their needs already available to them. So the work is just, no, I want to do something cool. And then if that works out, then that might be like a 10x or 100x payoff, which is way more interesting than a salary, right? Anyway, so I
Yeah.
thought that's pretty cool.
I think that fits into that same niche, into that same area, right? It's to a certain degree, they have enough money to yeah, to skip on a couple of salaries if they have to, or take
Yeah.
in a little bit less. So I think that just gives you that a completely different mindset on what you can do. And if you're then, of course, you then need to be interested to travel. And if you're not, it's not gonna happen. But if you're interested in doing that, then if you then also have that location flexibility, I think that's like the third thing that comes in, right? Like that, so you want to have that to like maxed out. It would be you can live anywhere in the world and still get income. I think that's like the highest tier of that. So
So
you
what are
can
the
just
three
move to
tiers again?
Cyprus and still.
What are the
I
tiers
forgot.
again?
The three tiers. I call like maybe there's like three pillars and then there's tiers on the pillars. I don't know, but I'd say like what was the first one I talked about? You'd have like minimal
Location independent.
possessions, and then that enables you to be location independent, right? If you have like a car that you love, a house full of books, right? I love reading, but I just cannot have a house full of books because every time I move, I'll be like, fuck, I got to sell all these books. I just can't. So this is a sacrifice I have to take. So it's something like that. Then the next thing is you have to be like financially independent. And this, I feel like many people think this is unattainable or you have to be a millionaire or a billionaire to do this. I don't think you have to. I think it's something like you just need a little bit on the side. And then that enables you to just say no to something. Maybe you don't like what's happening at work and you're just like, oh, fuck off. I'm not having this. I'm going to find something else. But I'll take 4 months for it to find that something else, to find something that's nicer or better. And I guess then the other thing is that you potentially with a new job or with your own business, even better, you'll have a location independent income, right? Where you would, yeah, your own business is like a global digital company and you're writing. Let's say you're a writer. That's the easiest way. You have a Substack and has 50,000 followers and half of them are paying you $10 a month. It doesn't matter where you live. Everything is like completely async. And you can be in Bali, you can be in New Zealand, and you're just publishing articles. People are paying you.
So I guess you had said that being flexible has been kind of on your mind or been I guess, one of your goals for the last 5 to 10 years. Um, where I guess, so to me, I would call what you're pursuing freedom, right? Like all these are like being flexible, time independent, location independent. These are all forms of freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you don't, the word's kind of loaded, but would you say that you're like, where are you at in your trip to being more independent, more like less attached? Like, do you still have tons of room for optimization, or you think you're getting pretty close,
I
or?
think I'm pretty close. Yeah. Like, once I think like then, and this is cool because this is sort of something, if you like think about doing all this, you're like, wow, this is all amazing, right? But of course, there's things that don't work out and they're not great, right? Like moving to Cyprus was a huge fail, right? It was like the shittiest decision we've ever done. Basically, as we stand now, I would have wished that we've never done it. And we sure sunk a lot of money into this, like moving, renting, buying a car, registering a business, all these things. And we've realized that we don't want to live here. We don't like it that much. And it was a risk coming here without ever being here before. But yeah, so, and then like, I think once you start doing that, and now we're like 5-6 months in Cyprus here, and we're like, okay, where do we go next? Another international move with 2 kids. That's a lot, right? So then I guess, like, to answer your question, the things that you then look for is a bit of stability. So what I'd like to, in this flexible or free lifestyle, is to be able to maybe have 2 places in the world that we can go back to, where I maybe have a shelf full of books that I can keep. But that requires a lot of money, right? To keep and maintain and run 2 houses or 2 apartments or whatever across the world. And I haven't figured out how to do it yet. Because it would be cool if you could somehow home share. Like, we could spend 3 months a year in UBB in the summer, and then the rest of the time is somewhere else. And it would both be our places. Because that part of this moving around is really annoying us. So imagine this. So you are going to WBB every year to visit, and you're living with your in-laws or your parents, because there's not a lot of places to rent for a short-term holiday. And so you're kind of moving in with them for that like 1 or 2 months. That's not great.
Really?
And whenever I tell this to my in-laws,
why.
right, they roll their eyes, and I'm like, okay, you now imagine, please, moving in with your in-laws, right? That's not going to happen. And so, yeah, that, I guess, is where that room of improvement would be, to find a little bit of stability with that freedom. Because just purely nomads with 2 kids, I don't think that's going to work.
I'm at a similar transition point, right? So between Germany and the US. So I guess what main thing that's different for me is that it's always been Dallas in the US. It hasn't been many different places. And then it's also been, the last 4 years at least, it's been like Eisenbach, which is a similarly metropolitan area as WBB, I think. But it is incredibly exhausting to stay with young kids in like short-term rentals, because you need so much stuff just to make daily life function when you have kids under 3, right?
Oh, God. Yeah.
And just setting that up every time, and then even if we're there for 6 to 8 weeks, it's a grind, right? And it's a lot of money that we waste every time. It's a lot of effort. And so we're also definitely craving to just have a place to arrive that's already home. Like, even if you have to set it up again, but at least all your stuff's there. That makes quite the difference. But then,
so how do you do it? How do you do it? How are you solving it?
I mean, we were staying with family, but now with the second kid, it's just too tight. It just doesn't work. And so we did the first time short-term rental on this past trip. So we had a nice size house for 6 of the 8 weeks that we were there. And it actually worked quite well. It was in a super nice neighborhood. You could walk to a park, walk to a pool. Like, it was awesome. So, but then we had to extend the trip because some stuff happened at work. And then the next 2 weeks we were like in a tiny little shitbox. And then it's, so not only do you have to have the effort of moving in there now, but then you're also in a crappier place. And now it's like, everything sucks.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We are looking into all the ways that we could buy a house there, and then when we're not there, we'll do the short-term rental, right? Because like the rates are also so incredibly high. Like, we pay $5,000 a month just to rent it. So it's insane. So you said, it needs a lot of money. Like, it needs a lot of money. It's the only reason this works is because I own the company that is doing this stuff, right? So if I was an employee, this would not work at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. But I think then there's a phase, then once the kids get older, where it allows more flexibility again. But I think this period now where they're like, so dependent on the parents for everyday stuff, it is really good to just have stability.
I don't think they would even want to travel then. That's what I'm thinking, like, right? If Rocky goes to daycare and then at some point goes to school, and you're saying, like, we're going to go to the US for 6 weeks, I don't think he's going to be happy with that. Once he's been in daycare for a year, right? And like really happy and has his friends.
So we're about to find out. So we'll put he'll go to Akita here in September for 4 weeks, and then we're going back to the US. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But I strongly suspect that it is like you say. I think he'll be like, "Why? I made friends now. Like I want to be here." Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Charlotte was exactly the same. She like, it was really, really hard for her to leave.
Yeah.
And it just get easier, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know. So, but for me, like, I really, as much as like the pursuit of freedom and entrepreneurship and all this is like super important to me, I of course don't want it to impact the kids in a negative way. And I don't think it has yet. And I'm not even sure that going back and forth, say, between two different circles, I don't know that it'll hurt them, right? It definitely is uncomfortable, but so usually uncomfortable things are good, but I just don't know if it's good to be that uncomfortable when you're that young. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're
It's
like
tough.
lacking, you're missing out on a couple of these like social things, like
Yeah.
in daycare or whenever we go to Germany, right? Like Charlie has two cousins her age, and they're just gonna go play all day long, right? And she doesn't have that here. And when we move somewhere else, it's again like finding new friends takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So
So yeah.
so you mentioned earlier that you'd say Cyprus was kind of a mistake. Like what could you explain a bit more why? I mean, I can kind of imagine, but
Why didn't you
why
tell
is it not
me?
Cyprus?
Yeah, it's like there's just a lot of things coming together. Right now, the most annoying thing really is the heat. It's just incredible how fucking hot it is here. It's like 35. It is soaking wet, humid. There's no shade, no trees. And then when we tell that to people, everybody's like, "But you moved from Sydney." I'm like, "Yeah, but in Sydney there's trees. They have trees. They don't have any trees here. There's a couple of palm trees that they they have, but they're like in these resorts where they water all day, and and like I said in the beginning, right? It's not meant or it's not built for this heat. With Noah's half a year old now, and you can't go for a walk with him in daytime. It's just impossible. Like you put him in the pram, put the thing on that gives him shade. You see like beads of sweat on his forehead and it's dripping down, and he's just gonna have like a heat shock if you keep him in there. You cannot do it. And even if you just had Charlie, who's 4, take care of the playground, not all of them have shade. So you have to wear like a hat, full on sunscreen. And it's just very, very hard to do. So I think like come here for a week or 2, it's nice, but longer than that, not. So heat is one thing. We honestly thought it was cheaper, right? So we scouted out from the distance, Facebook Marketplace and the local Gumtree, eBay, Kleinanzeigen, to check out what places are. And yeah, the places that are nice are much more expensive. And now we're kind of paying a similar price to what we have paid on the northern beaches in Sydney. And if I compare that to the quality of life, it's like absolutely not even close. Like, in DY, you have better climate, you have all the shops, good coffee, you have a nice beach. Here, you don't even have beaches. Like most of the times, it's just like some rocky reef if you want to go swimming.
Did you
So
say it's the
that's
same
more
price,
expensive.
northern beaches, Sydney and in Cyprus right now, like for rent, or is that just all
Not
in?
exactly.
But
No,
in the
let's talk about rent, right? So
yeah,
we have like an old 30-year-old 2-bedroom townhouse, and we're paying 1,600 euros for this a month. Like it hasn't been renovated for quite a long time. We have ocean view. We're like, you could walk down to go for a swim in like 3 minutes. We have a community pool that we can use, and so that's included in the 1,600. And we live in Paphos and in one of the outskirts of Paphos, so it's like a 70,000 people city, and we're like quite a bit outside of that, and that's where we're paying 1,600 euros. And on the northern beaches, now we have to do some currency translations here, but I think like roughly in euros, the last we paid was probably around the 2,000 to 2,200 for a 2-bedroom apartment, same distance to the beach, ocean view, And that was in like the best location in DY on the northern beaches in Sydney, right? So there's like really, really good coffee shops. There's an amazing beach. And you can take, best of all, you can go like walk for 5 minutes and you can take a bus that takes you to the Opera House in 40 minutes. Here, you know, you can go to a shitty 50, 70,000 people town for that same. Given that, right? So I guess like you have to like quality of life adjust it a little bit. But yeah, it's also not cheap. Cost of food is also expensive. Try to find grass-fed beef here, it's impossible. Whereas in Australia, that's of course like very, very cheap. But everything else is just more expensive, or it has the quality is not as great. So yeah, you're paying more for food. You're paying about the same amount for rent, and then the culture, we don't get along with that culture very well, and I can understand that. You know, you're on this very nice Mediterranean island. There's 1,000 tourists coming in every day, and lots of people moving here for taxes. Lots of G-Wagons here. You know, and they come here because you essentially pay like a 10% corporate tax or 11% corporate tax. It's very attractive in Europe to come here. And I think like the locals, they've just seen house prices 4x in the last 2-3 years. And in Australia, it's hard to tell me from a local, right? Because Australia is just such a mixed culture. Here, it's not. I don't look like a local. I don't look like a Greek, Cypriot, whatever. And most people that don't come here don't. So they see you immediately. And we find like the people are not really friendly here. Then it's this, we call it low trust culture. So it's like you have to negotiate over everything. You got to be aware that you're going to be ripped off in every corner with everything, right? There's like, if you want to get your residency permit and you want to have it within reasonable amounts of time, you have to hire somebody that then bribes someone to get you that thing. All of these things are just could have expected that, but don't know, right? Like, do you know all these things? I don't, and I've lived in a bunch of different countries, so yeah, I figured it out. And then the thing that really, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was, I love surfing, and I was kind of like hoping surfing here would work. And then I came here and I looked at the surf forecast, as I always do, and I saw like, oh, there's some big swell coming. I was like, cool, it's going to be windy, but it's going to be nice. And then I figured out that they really have some decent waves here, and there's not a lot of people. So the first couple of weeks, I just went surfing all the time, and it was great. I was like, cool, this is amazing. We get waves here. It wasn't that hot then. And then, I don't know, I fell out of favor with the locals, and they pulled out of the vents out of my tires and yelled at me, you know, and weren't really polite to me in the water. So they didn't like that I was surfing at their spot. And that kind of was where I said, like, okay, I don't like these people here. That's not my thing.
Wow.
It's never happened to me before, right? I've been surfing
you were just too
for a
good
long
on
time.
the waves. You're just too good. They couldn't handle some foreigner coming and showing them how to do all the tricks.
All the tricks.
Yeah.
I'm not even that good, you know.
But yeah, I guess these are the things you don't know that you don't know, right? And you go into the situation and then you find out, and then you have to decide, do you want to cut your loss, or do you want to, you know, sunken costs, continue to keep throwing good money after bad, or in this case, maybe good time after bad, right?
Yeah, it's more the time that you're wasting, right? Because we're sitting here every day, and it's kind of like, God.
I remember when we had that call and you were telling me about it, right? And for me, I think if I remember correctly, I think I mentioned to you that it's also different when you have kids, right? Like, because to have young kids in a culture where you don't feel, like you said, it's high trust, or in this case, you actually feel people being openly aggressive or antagonizing towards you. How does it, you know, if you're a single guy, you know, you can just forget it and just maybe find another surf spot, right? But when you have young kids, it's a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
And then when you have to start thinking about, if we really put our roots in here, it means our kids go to school here, and that means I can't be with them 8 hours, 10 hours a day. They're going to be entrusted to somebody else. And you just saw that this culture might not be as high trust as you're used to, it's hard, right? Because you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly that. I think those are like then all of these other things that kind of popped up for us that like just solidified that decision that we ultimately want to leave again, right? Because that's just the surface, right? There's a ton more that we're like, maybe this is not the best place. And then we stopped looking for childcare immediately, right? We were like, no, it's not even going to happen. And then things like, so if we're not looking for childcare, that means we're here temporarily anyway. So then are we like doing our kids a favor by even being here for another day? Because they're kind of just like sitting at home all the time. And in aircon, they can't do anything. We can't take them anywhere. And we're not going to settle down here. Not going to happen. So is it even worth staying much longer? Right? But then comes all this unwinding again, right? Like, you got to wind down the company again. You got to find a replacement tenant for your apartment, or you keep paying for it. You got to get rid of the few things that you bought. Yeah, that then adds to that nomad experience, right? So it's not always all great.
No, for sure.
Do you know that, Lovis? Yeah.
Do you have a place in mind where you think you might go next, or is it still completely open?
No, we think we want to, for the next couple of years, we want to go to either New Zealand, like try out New Zealand, because we think it's culturally very similar to Australia. And as Australians, we can live in New Zealand and work there and don't need any of the permits. And I think, it will be a similar high trust culture than Australia. I've been there a bunch of times, and that's just what it feels like, right? The government will work the same way. Healthcare will be very similar, all of that. Plus, there's no capital gains tax, which is something I like. And the taxes are a bit lower than in Australia. So that could be an option that we want to try. But yeah, it's the thing that we're kind of like going through in our heads is, do we want to go through this again? And then find out it's not the right thing, ultimately ending back up on the northern beaches in Sydney, which would be our go-to place, right? And then all of our friends will be telling us, we told you so. Why did you try out all these different things?
You'll still be richer for it, in my opinion.
I think so too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so you call this a mistake, right? But I'd say, or what would you say, like making mistakes on your journey towards freedom or flexibility or independence, like what role does that play in your opinion? It's like think about business, investing, like life in general, finding partners.
Yeah. I think it's huge, because you learn through these mistakes, right? Only if it really burns into your mind, then you're going to be sure that you're likely not going to encounter it again. We're not so sure what that Cyprus mistake is going to teach us, but maybe it's something like, hey, don't go and rent a place within the first 3 weeks of being there, or maybe scout out the area a bit better before you do, or only pick countries where you think the culture will fit. I don't know. But I totally agree. There's always some kind of lesson that comes out of a big mistake that you have, right? That you have made, and that ultimately shapes like how you do things in the future, like how you make your next move. Yeah. Maybe next time you're not gonna sign up for a 1-year lease again. You're only gonna take on like shorter leases, even if you're paying a little bit more for that. I don't know. There's all sorts of different things. And then maybe when you leave, you're going to value the high trust culture even more. You're going to come back and you're going to be like more satisfied with what you have within one of these high trust countries, because you're going to be like, yeah, that's amazing. I'm happy to pay slightly higher taxes because they're not going to try and fuck me over in every corner. And the government services are all online, and it's very transparent on what you get, right? It's not, you have to know some guy and that guy's going to bribe that other guy to get you a spot in the queue.
Yeah, I actually think I really strongly agree with that, because I think you don't know what you have until you're somewhere else. And if you don't know what you have, then it's hard for you to appreciate it, right? I grew up in Singapore, always just thinking about what's wrong with the place, right? All the stuff that I didn't like about the place. And it was only after I left and I started living overseas, paid taxes overseas, went to hospitals overseas, right? Tried to interact with authorities overseas. then I realized, oh my God, right? How good is Singapore, and how are they doing that with the amount of taxation they're collecting, and how, there's certain things that you take for granted back home, they don't even exist. The concepts don't even exist overseas, right? But I wouldn't have known any
Yeah.
of that had I not left. I would have only just been complaining, right?
You're certainly a Singapore maxi now.
Oh,
You're like very
100%.
happy with everything there, right? And you keep sending me stuff about them doing the right policies and this, and that's pretty cool. Like maybe what's going to happen, all of us are going to end up where we started after a 10-year travel around the world, and all be like, okay, now we've seen that nowhere is actually better than WBB. I'm going to settle down here now.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, right? Like home sort of finds a way to set that equilibrium position, right? And maybe for some people you never ever feel balanced until you're back at that 0 point. But you don't know.
But I think
you don't
there's
know
also
until you
this,
try.
yeah, exactly. You have to try. But I think that like in our mind, we've always been thinking this. We moved from Germany to Singapore, and that was an upgrade for us at that time, right? Because we were like, pretty cool. Like the whole government thing works well. You get a lot more money because the taxes are much lower, and you can explore all these nice countries. You can afford a taxi, food a lot more diverse, and offerings that you can get. That was an upgrade for us. And then when we moved to Australia, it was an upgrade again. Like we moved to Australia, and it was sort of, yeah, government is still pretty good. Taxes are a bit higher, but you still have this diverse food offering where you can get like good Vietnamese food in Sydney, definitely much better than what you can get in Germany. And yeah, that was an upgrade. But then Cyprus wasn't. So maybe it's with this whole moving thing, you have to find upgrades. You have to find, or at least in some aspects, it has to be better. And that's what you're hunting for, maybe when moving somewhere else. And then maybe at some point you arrive at that place that's just perfect. And you're like, okay, there's can't go any further from here for us. So you have to stay. And that's probably the same for, I don't know, for you guys, right? You're to some degree scouting it out. Maybe you're moving to Dallas, and that's going to be an upgrade. Staying there, I don't know. Yeah.
For me, so between the US and Germany, I'd say it's very similar. There's pros and cons to both, and I really enjoy being in both for different reasons. The main thing that I'm super worried about is that I'm currently liable for taxes in both countries for different reasons, and that's just a catch, like this. I don't know. It's just a trap waiting to fall on my face, basically, whatever you call it.
They have tax agreements at least.
Yeah, they do. But the problem is almost nobody knows how to navigate them. So I'm like on my third person to try to figure it out, and they're just like, I don't know.
Damn.
So that's great. No, but yeah, Gloria and I think about this a lot. What would really be an upgrade, right? Where would really be the place outside of Germany and the US to go? And I don't really know.
Let's just all go to New Zealand. Make that the center of the world.
Very far.
Very far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a very weird accent.
I know exactly which YouTube video Lovis is thinking about right now.
The dicks.
But so, Flo, so we haven't talked about work really, right? Your current project, what you're currently working on. So, I mean, you and I really met because of you kind of bootstrapped up the tokenomics DAO. And then through Jason, I got roped into it in the best possible way. And I guess we ran with that together for about a year. But then, we went separate ways, but I guess on the best of terms, right? So what's going on with that project, and where is it at? Because I know a little, but I really don't know that much. So I'm super curious to hear.
Okay. Yeah. I was kind of, I kept going after you, went a different way, pursued your business that you had all along. And I had this other guy, Mason, that was part of that effort. But then at some point, he also had seemed to lost interest. And that was during, it's in the crypto space. So tokenomics DAO is like a crypto thing where we we're taking care of tokenomics, trying to explore that whole space. And so you have these bear and bull cycles like you have in the financial markets, but crypto's even worse. So it can be a bear market, everything's down, you feel like you lost all your money, and then everybody seems to lose interest at these times. And that is like what it felt like. And but yeah, I just kept going. We did this little trip, and in the bus, I was working on a couple of other things on the side, but just kept it alive, kept it going. And then at some point, this guy reaches out and like really weird, writes me on LinkedIn, writes me on Twitter, and I think like also an email or something like that. And he says like, "Oh, super interested in what you're doing. We should explore a partnership, whatever." I'm like, okay, I'll get on a call with him. We'll talk, and we get along, right? And we're like, hey, there might be something there. We might have a similar vision. And we go on and explore that for some time longer. Long story short, we end up joining forces where they acquire tokenomics DAO. And the company that I'm now part of is called Forgd. And the guy who contacted me back then was Shane. And Shane and I, interestingly, come from these like two different areas, right? I'm like more of the tech coming into this tokenomics space. He's definitely a lot more on the financial markets side of things, but also been in crypto for very long and working there. And so we found that we have these complementary skills that belong together in this end-to-end process of designing a token to ultimately launching it. And I think that was a pretty cool match that we were able to make there. And now we're working together on this business called Forged that dives a lot into this whole software business. So we're trying to reinvent Web3 advisory. So I think like a nice example to explain this would be if you're a startup, not a crypto startup, any startup, you're a tech startup, means you're some tech founder, and you've been developing software, chewing glass, all that kind of fun stuff. And then you're like at that time where you've raised Series A, Series B, whatever, and you want to do your IPO, but you have no fucking clue how that works, right? So you have to get an investment bank to help you how to structure this all, right? Like maybe do another fundraising. You need to plan your IPO. You need to strategize how many shares you're going to start, what price you're going to start, who are you going to sell to preliminarily. And then what are you going to do after that with these shares? How many are you going to hold, right? This whole financial market side of things. And I think like that's what we provide to crypto startups. But we're trying to make it in a way that we have tools for a lot of these things, projects. Because, in crypto, it's not like with traditional businesses, right? Where they will go and build something for years and years and years and be very mature and then do an IPO. In crypto, it's almost like, all right, you've done something for half a year and now you're going to launch a token, right? You're like very immature in your whole thinking. Maybe you don't have a lot of funding for a lot of these projects. And so, a lot of this will be self-serve. So we're trying to make this so people can self-serve and use our tools. So what's interesting are aspects like a tool that we've just recently built is Monetary Market Maker. It's completely out of my area of expertise that I had when we joined forces, but now I'm somewhat of an expert on it. And Monetary Market Maker is every token that launches. Similar to the traditional financial markets, you'll have a market maker, right? A guy that provides liquidity on certain trading pairs, right? On your token and US dollars, and make sure that there's sufficient liquidity that someone who trades that token has a good user experience, right? You guys know that you're building some software in that area too, right? So that's something that's super important. And we built a tool that basically allows any crypto project to monitor the liquidity that their market maker is providing. So they typically sign contracts with their market makers to align on certain KPIs on how much depth they're going to provide, the volume and the spreads. And then, that tool allows them to track that. So that's something we've just launched a month ago. And I'm basically acting as the CTO, whatever you might, think of that. We're a startup. We have like 10 people. So it's all quite small, but we have a decent development decent dev team, and some cool project that we're working on all around this area.
Super cool. I'm super happy that some seed of the DAO is carrying on, right? Like me withdrawing from it was never out of lack of interest or thinking that there wasn't anything there. I was just got too busy with other stuff, basically.
Yeah.
And
I think that was with most people, right? I think I was almost at that point at some point, where I was like, "Oh, is this the right thing I'm doing?" Right?
Yeah, crypto is special in that way. It really tests your conviction. Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I think it speaks to sticking with it, right? And being consistent. And I definitely think that you're very good at that. Like you're very consistent. You're very high, very productive and like prolific. And so I'm glad that it's working out in some shape or form. And of course, it's not the end of the story, right? So super curious to see what keeps happening with Forged.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some interesting partnerships coming up. We've currently partnering with Solana, which is something that, Shane brought into this whole thing, right? His relationship with the ecosystem as a whole. So he had that when he started Forged, he had a partnership with Solana set up, and that brings us a lot of high quality projects that we work with. And we're kind of building this like free to use toolkit for that. So yeah, I think I'm like super excited. We got a ton of really cool things. I love working on this. I'm learning a lot about things that I didn't know before, like liquidity and market making or launching tokens. That's all like really, really interesting. And of course, like I'm a tech guy. I like working on technology, and now, I have this little team that I work with and a topic that I'm interested in. So, yeah, and also, I live wherever I want. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
as long as we have some time zone overlap, which is pretty cool.
But that's the best thing, right? Like if you're super interested in doing what you're doing, waking up every day, and can't wait to sink your teeth in. That's also, the first part of the conversation we're talking about freedom like financial freedom, location independence, right? So that's a bit like freedom from, right? Freedom from needing to be in a certain place, freedom from needing to worry too much about money, right? Freedom from owning too many things. But maybe after you've gotten those, like tick those basic boxes, they're not easy to tick, right? But when you manage to do that, then you have these options to figure out what you have the freedom to do, right? And in this case, after knocking on a few doors, trying a few different things, you landed on something with Forged, where you're free to work on these super interesting and exciting projects, right? That get you really energized. And so I think that's super cool,
Yeah.
to have that, right?
And,
like people,
yeah.
it's such an asset, to have something to work towards that you're aligned with, excited to do. It's that ikigai thing, right? That everyone's probably seen on Twitter, right? Or Instagram, where just everything aligns, and overlaps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And I think like to a degree, I don't know how you find it. It's just kind of stumble into it. And then I think like the problem that many people have is that like once you've found it, that thing that you're like interested in, there's still many different areas that will make it even better. And so you keep exploring that. Shane and I initially, when we started, I was never too outspoken about my tech background, right? Because I don't know, I don't think of myself as a great developer. I think of myself like a hobby developer. I'm like maybe good at prototyping, but not building like solid software. And so I never really talked about it. And so when we set up the partnership, I was kind of like going in. I thought like, okay, I'll be tokenomics expert and I'll help out, writing content, producing that kind of stuff, and scoping out the tools that I know a lot about, but being more on the feature side. And then out of necessity, we figured out that, Shane's really good at this part. and I'm really good at that other part. And we really, got down to, hey, we need to play our strengths here. You are super strong at managing, building, and running with a tech team, and he's really strong at selling, doing relationships, and planning out these like future versions of what we want to do, right? And that was something I think that now that we've gotten to that point, we figured that out. I think it's even better because now I don't have to do the things that I don't like, and he doesn't have to do the things that he doesn't like. So it's like win-win, right? So if you get to that point, that was pretty cool to figure that out. And I think that's where it started to click for me, where it was really like, cool, I'm having a lot of fun here.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Flo, I mean, you're in the crypto space, right? And I mean, I think there's several, like more than 20 episodes of podcasts where I was part of some of them where we discussed and questioned the very fabric of what is money, right?
Jesus Christ, yeah.
But so, I mean, money keeps coming up in our conversation today because it's a necessity, right? Without money, we can't get the things that we want. But then at the same time, the pursuit of money is not really the thing that we're after, right? It's really flexibility and freedom, I would say. But so could you say a bit, like, did you have something like an aha moment about what money is or the role of money that it is in your life?
Yeah, maybe there's this, and I've got this little blog, and I named it Rediscovering the Known, because I think I keep figuring out these things that everybody already knows. But, it's just like when you tell me something, it won't click with me. Oftentimes, right? You can give me all your wisdom and I'll be like, yeah, okay, Lovis is very wise, but that doesn't make me wise. So only after me exploring it and then it clicking with me do I realize these things, right? And so one of the things that I've kind of like rediscovered that I think everybody knows is that you can buy time, right? So that money can buy you time. And when that just really clicked in for me, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool, right? I can use my savings and the money that I accumulate not only to buy myself a Toyota Land Cruiser or a nice vacation on the Maldives, but I can also use that money to take a year off with my kids, travel in a bus, right? Or take 5 months off to not work because I don't fucking care about that current job and it doesn't give me anything, right? That's like, yeah, I think that's kind of where that's definitely something that clicked for me, is that money can buy you time. And it might sound super stupid, right? And we're like, I know that, come on, like, don't tell me this, right? But it was really, when I realized that, I started to apply this in my life, right? And I like building spreadsheets. So I built this spreadsheet, and it's like in one of my blog posts, and I called it Fuck You Money spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet is basically just like doing your expenses every month. And that's what I've been doing for the last 7-8 years. Every month I track how much I spend and how much my income is. And with that, you can calculate sort of your savings rate, how much you spend, right? And so if you have your savings and your annual spend, you know your runway. So that's it. And that simple figure is going to tell you how long can you last if there's no income, right? Or with fewer income. So it essentially calculates down how much time you have to spend on things that you like. Powerful realization for me, at least.
Yeah, I think it's super profound realization. Like, don't think that everybody knows this. I think almost nobody knows this, and even the people that know it theoretically may have never like discovered it. You know what I mean? Like, it's knowing that the stove is hot and touching it are two different things, right? Like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
yeah, it's super cool.
I think it's this Chinese saying, right? I'm not even sure if it's Chinese, but like, when the student is ready, the master will appear. Jason, you can probably help me with that. I'm butchering this, but there's something there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, somebody said that. I don't know, is it Lao Tzu or somebody? But it's true.
Oh, yeah.
You can't. Things are all around us, ready to be observed. But like you said, right, it's the application of that knowledge. So, rediscovering the known. How do you actually make it yours, right? You need to chew on it and digest it a bit, and then it becomes part of you, right?
Yeah, true. Cool. Such a
you
cool
had
process we're all going through.
Yeah. Do you so also because of previous talks we've had, how does money and flexibility and status play together for you? So what status mean?
I guess like status has no importance, and I fight really hard so it doesn't. I think like to me it's just like labeled as a bad thing. I don't want to chase after shiny things that give me status, because I think that's like pushing in the wrong direction. Where if I talk about like the three pillars of flexibility for me is like not owning a lot. Okay, I love watches, right? And I'd love to go and buy a really nice Patek Philippe or a Rolex, and have that. But I know it's going to make me less flexible because I can't go to any country and spot a shiny watch. Can't do that. So I've got this like beat up Singaporean Seiko movement watch, and it's nice. It's good enough, right? It tells the time, and I fight really hard to get away from that status because I think it distracts from flexibility, from time, and also from like why that money is important. And then I think like if you don't like if you try to zoom out of that status, achieving fuck you money is actually easier, right? Because I think like a lot of people that have money, mistakes that they make is that with more money that you have, your living standards also raise up. And so you might be earning 500,000, but your expenses are almost matching that. So you're living paycheck to paycheck, as stupid as it sounds, right? Because you have a 6-bedroom house and you drive a Porsche and all these different things. So if you can try and stay away from all that, maybe you don't need that much to have a really great life and pursue other things. And I don't think status is something, for me at least, worth pursuing, right? I'm pursuing time because ultimately what I want is to spend time with my kids. Yeah, just have like a good time.
So if money is just a means to an end. No, yeah, go ahead, Jake.
No, I just wanted to say I kind of knew you were gonna answer about status that way. Lovis and I were even joking about it, saying, "Hey, should we just ask Flo to come onto the podcast, and he needs to wear like a nice shirt and maybe a tie, just to fuck with him."
I don't even have that. I'm waiting for that filter so I can not wear a t-shirt at all on those video calls.
I told Lovis like that would be a really quick way to make sure the episode doesn't happen.
Please wear a shirt. Yeah, I don't know. Status is, it's hard. I think it's hard. I don't know what you guys think, but like it's, unless you really want status, okay, then go and pursue it. But if you don't want status, then it's hard to keep it out, right? It's a constant fight over like, oh man, I'd love an automatic car with like lane assist and all these fucking features. But no, I'm going to stick to a shitty beat up car.
Yeah, it's super hard. It's such a slippery slope, right? And I think for us, having kids also makes it harder because there's so many there's tons of gadgets for the kids, and there's so many things where everybody's like, oh no, but you have to do it this way. And then it's like, do you though? Do you?
Yeah.
Like just even with the Kita stuff, like not that that's part of status necessarily, but there's just so many conventional wisdoms like, oh, you have to do it this way. And most of these lead you to a road of, because you have to be ranked on this table. And depending on how your rank is, that's how we think about you. And these are all traps, right? So like avoid at all costs unless it's impossible somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, agreed.
But if it's not about money, because money is just a means to an end, and it's not about status, like how do you know if you're doing good, right? Like how do you know if you're successful?
Or at least on the road,
have the things that
I want to success.
I always set these kind of goals, right? And maybe achieving these goals and having what I want. So for some time, that goal was I got into surfing when I lived in Germany. And I did this trip and learned how to surf. And I was like, that's fun. I'll do it again. And I'll do it again and again and again and again until I did like every single one of my holidays, did it surfing. And then at some point I was like, I got to live somewhere where the ocean is because it's so much fun. I'd love to do it every day. And that then drove me to eventually, I guess, it was never my goal to move to Australia to live in the northern beaches to go surf there every day, but it was kind of like subconsciously driving my towards that. And I think that's something, yeah, always having these goals, right? I don't know, maybe like one of these goals could be before my kids are where they don't want to spend time with me anymore, right? I maybe want to go and take another year off and go and travel with them, right? Because we did this 6 months in the bus and I was still working, but it was such an amazing time with just one child. But we had like the greatest of times. It was pretty special, and I'd love to do that again. So that would be something that defines that success, to have these like really interesting, cool moments. Maybe it's something that like the current problem that we have, where we're like nomads. We don't really know where to live. We love Australia, but we also want to go to Germany. Maybe at some point it's having 2 houses. Maybe that could be a thing of success. But I don't want 2 houses out of status. I want it out of, because that makes my life easier and more livable. Because then I can have a bookshelf in each and a bit of stuff on each. I don't have to travel around the world with like 6 suitcases full of everything that we own. And maybe like a
So
nice
you're
desk
looking
with a
for
screen.
looking
Right?
for function and quality over status, right? And status is more like what
Yeah.
the outside world is using to judge you by, right? But when we talk about the houses, it's about you. You don't. I'm sure you don't even care if no one in the whole world knows that you've got 2 houses or how that house looks like, right? You'd just be
I'm
happy
going to
to
try
have
really
it.
hard not to tell anyone, right?
Yeah.
It's not that it's easy, right? Of course you want to go and like, fuck, I'm the coolest guy ever. I've got 2 houses.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to try really hard not to tell anyone, because I don't want that to matter for me. It'll be more something, because I think it makes us as a family a lot happier. Because
Yeah.
then we can just spend the winter here and spend the summer there and like have the best of both worlds. And I think like just we as a family will be happier, will be nicer. I don't know. So I think it's more like that pursuit of what makes our life generally better. Like living somewhere where you feel like you're on vacation. That's also something, right? Like when we moved in Germany, you always, or at least I always had that urge going on vacation somewhere. But then when we moved to Australia, northern beaches, we just didn't go anywhere for a year. And we never bothered because it was just so nice. It always felt like you're on holiday, so you don't need it. That little move then gives you so much more like bang for the buck in your life. So yeah.
Super cool. So you've come pretty far, right? You've been working at this probably 5 to 10 years, probably more like 10. But if somebody discovers our conversation here today, and they also want to impart on a journey towards like freedom, flexibility, financial independence, where would you tell them to focus or what to do to get started?
I would say like, these 3 pillars, but I don't think you're going to be able to achieve the 3 pillars if you don't have something that really drives you, some goal. And I think that's something I've kind of like, I don't know if I've written this down in rediscovering the known, but it certainly fits into that category of me rediscovering something that not everybody, but that many people probably already know. And there's like, I bet there's like books on it. But this topic of, if you have this long-term goal and that's really ingrained in your mind, you're going to make so many subconscious decisions towards that goal. So it's almost like if you say, I want to live by the beach one day, and you currently don't, and it's like super far off, it's like the most far away thing you can ever imagine, right? But then if that is really truly your goal that you absolutely want and long for, I think like from then on, every little decision will be like trying to get you there. So that could be something like, okay, I need to save more money. I can't be spending that much because otherwise I cannot try out living somewhere. So then maybe that's going to enable you to sell a bunch of your things and live with less, or maybe also enable you to not spend so many things on like status stuff and just save your money to have more runway to maybe explore living in a different country or whatever, right? I think it's that goal, like identify what a 5 to 10 year goal is for you, and then try and work towards that. I don't know if this works for other people, but for me, if I look back, I've always had something that I've had in my mind that I wanted to achieve. That's
Nice.
some sort of goal. I've always been subconscious. And if I look back now, I can see like, okay, at that point I made that decision. And I think this was because in my mind, that's what I wanted to achieve. But at the point of making the decision, I didn't think about that. It was kind of like built in. It was like, yeah, of course I need to do that because it just felt right.
Flo, have you read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?
Yeah, it didn't click with me
Okay.
back then.
Didn't.
Maybe I need to
So,
read it again.
I
Is it
think
about the
have a
stopping?
read.
See if I forgot
So
about it.
the line in that book that has always stuck with me, right, is when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it, right? And I think it ties in completely with what you've just said, right? So maybe have a read of that book again. Or anyone else who's listening
I will.
in, always recommend that book when I talk to somebody who's kind of on their own journey, right? And they're a bit unsure and they're like, hey, there's so many different options. There's so many different things I can do. How do I know where to start, right? And will it work? It's a bit scary, very scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that book kind of lays it out in a very, it's easy to grasp, right? It's a book where I think can impact many different readers in different stages of life.
Yeah. But then still, I think back when I read it, I was not ready to learn it. So
the master didn't appear yet.
That's also,
Student wasn't
it's
ready.
always that because the student was ready. And that's always this fascinating thing, right? Like you could read the book at the wrong time and then it completely blows past you. All that wisdom that was in there, maybe, right? And you didn't. Yeah. So I don't remember that line from the book because
I'm sure there are parts in there that were exactly describing your Cyprus experience.
Okay, I'll read it. I will. Yeah.
We'll have another podcast after you've read it. And then we'll also need to have like a secret word between us so that we know when you've got your 2 houses and your 2 bookshelves, but you don't want anyone else to know, but I would like to know. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey Jason, I'm reading tons of books now, and they're all physical books.
And it's warm. Yeah, I'll let you guys know. It'll be a while though, I think.
Yeah, but don't forget to enjoy the journey, right? Because it's not only the getting there, but the stuff you learn along the way, not only about stuff, but also about yourself, is also something that will keep with you, right? And like what you said earlier, how when you learn something, it really has to hurt so that it gets burnt into your psyche, right? And you learn to make better decisions that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. On my own journey, I have this idea about myself, about who I am, right? And sometimes when I fall flat on my face, I'm forced to look in the mirror and say, hey, either you learn from this or you're not who you thought you were, right? And you have to ask yourself, is my identity still the same? Because if it is, then you better get into shape, right? And not let that happen again. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. That's definitely something I need to work on, like finding out that you don't, just not pursue those goals, but also try and live in that moment of maybe like enjoying it a little bit that we're here in Cyprus and that we have sun out every day for the last,
One of my biggest regrets, right, was when I was 18, I had to be in the army for 2 years, right? And I always wanted I knew I had to go to the army, and I always said to myself, hey, since I'm going, I want to go in there and like do it properly, right? Like if they tell me to jump out of helicopters, I'll do it, right? Or if they tell me to go do something tough, why not, right? Make the most of that time. But then what happened was I got injured. I tore like a ligament in my knee. And so then, just with the rules they had, basically I was bound to a desk, right? I wasn't allowed to do anything too physical. And so I spent that 2 years feeling like, oh, this is such a waste of time. This is such a waste of time. I'm not, you know what, I'm so trapped. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, right? And I made myself suffer so much just because I couldn't accept the situation, right? And now when I think back, it's like, yeah, it wasn't nice, right? But I could have used that 2 years way better if I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling so sorry for myself, right? If I had have just taken stock of the situation and then said, okay, I'm not going to be able to change this. It is what it is, but I'm going to be here for 2 years. What can I do during this time? You know, it would have been, I would have loved to have that 2 years back, even though I was stuck in an army camp, even though I only had 2-3 hours free a day, right? It was still better to use those 2-3 hours in a better way than just sitting in a bunk bed, right, with 12 guys monkeying around, feeling sorry for yourself. Right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I've had so many moments where I think, like, I wish I had that time back. In hindsight, you're always smarter, I think, with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're investments, right? So you learned it. You learned it when you were still young, and
Yeah.
and I guess you learned it pretty cheap, right? So
Yeah.
for the rest of your life now, you're like, man, I'm here. Let me make the most of it, right? So that's become like, I think, your basic programming now, and I think that's for that it was good, right?
Yeah. Do you think
And
that
you
was
would.
worth something, Trey?
Yeah, I
That
think
time
so.
sitting at the desk?
I think so. Because it's worth a lot to me now, because now when I find myself in such a position, very quickly, like my fuse is super short now, right? I very quickly either say, hey, I need to get out of here, or I need to accept this and be okay with it, right? Like it like we've talked about it before, right? Like it's not, there are many things I wanted to do, and maybe coming to Leipzig in Germany makes it more complicated to do those things, right? But I yeah, I have to just redefine what I'm trying to do so that I can't use Leipzig as an excuse. You know, I just really don't want to ever spend days, hours even, sitting there feeling sorry for myself, right? Because I know it's hurt me before, and it was just dumb, right? So yeah, maybe I can't
Yeah.
do thing A, B, C in Leipzig, but maybe I can do things D, E, F, right? Like, hey, there's a beautiful lake 10 minutes drive away. What's stopping you from going there every single day, right? Besides insects that might bite you and give you nasty infections.
Very dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like that. I just force myself to the situation might be the same, but your perspective on it can change. That's up to you, right? And that's something you have control over. So why not get creative to change your perspective so that you can flourish, right, in that situation.
Yeah. Such a Zen move. Easier said than done.
It's
No, it's
way
true. Like
easy.
that's
It's
probably the
way
lessons
easier
you have
said
to
than
learn
done.
to then,
Yeah.
yeah,
I couldn't
build them
do it.
into your mind.
Yeah, when I was in Singapore, I couldn't do it, right? I spent all my time feeling so sorry for myself, hating it, right? Wishing time would pass faster. I had a clock on my desktop that counted down how many years, months, days, hours, minutes till I was free.
Yeah.
And you had your leave days in there and everything, right? And it's just crazy to live like that, because you're spending time thinking you wish you wasn't there, right? So
Yeah.
every second is it's suffering, right? Which is such it's a waste. And I hope I don't
But what you
ever
would have
fall
done,
in that
like
trap again.
now at that age, you just taking a book to work and read that?
Yeah, exactly. Read the book, right? Do what you need to do. Get it done. you're in the army, right? Like go run on go. I was on East Coast. My camp was in Badok, right? So I was on the East Coast Park. Just get it done.
Yeah.
Tell your sergeant or whatever, hey, it's done. I'm gonna go for a run. I'm gonna go for an hour's run, right? Or I'm gonna go to the gym, or I'm gonna read this book. And if you're unhappy, tell me something else to do, right?
Yeah.
But instead, what I stupidly did in an immature way was act busy so that nobody's gonna tell me to do something else, right?
Give you more tasks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just silly, right? It's really, really silly. But
Yeah,
yeah,
true.
lesson learned, and hope it doesn't. I still meet some of these guys, right? Like I'm still good friends with some of these guys, and we were 18 together, facing this. You don't know much about life when you're 18, right? You just know
No.
that oh my god, right? 2 years, I'm not free for this 2 years. I have to listen to these people that I don't know. If I do something wrong, my weekend's gone, right? I might even get thrown into jail if I screw up how I load a rifle, right? When I know nothing about a rifle, stuff like that. But now we look back
Yeah.
and it helps us tremendously because just also when you're in a tough time, you tell yourself, how tough is it really when you compare to how it was back then, right? This is easy. You would have killed to be in such a position. You wouldn't even
Yeah.
have been able to imagine such a position, right? And yet here you are now. So why are you feeling sorry for yourself, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So yeah, silver
Learning
linings,
these
man.
lessons is just hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the shame would be if you go through it and you don't learn from it, right? That would be the real shame.
Yeah. So how do you do that? Like, how do you make sure that you learn something from everything? How can I now, when I leave Cyprus, make sure that I learn something?
I don't know. I would say the very important ingredient would be to be aware, right? Like I think you'll have moments of pain or shame or frustration or whatever negative emotion you want. I don't think you'll be sad, right? But there'll be certain emotions that come up. And I think the question would be when those negative emotions come up and it hurts, how do you react to them, right? Like, do you sit with them and say, yeah, actually, it was a waste, but what could I have done different? Or maybe I had no choice. So if that's the case, then no point feeling bad about it. But if you could take something away from it, you should. So don't escape from that pain, right? Don't try to drown it out or forget about it or erase that memory, right? Which I think we often do. Like with my investing, right? Sometimes like I get over levered and I'm like, man, I want to run into a wall, right? Like I'm so unhappy at myself because I'm like, you knew you shouldn't have done that, yet you still did, right?
Yeah.
And then what's the lesson, right? The lesson is, do you put in some new rules so that you never ever do that again? Or do you just forget about it and say, oh yeah, tomorrow I hope it goes back up and then I'll make back all my losses, right? I think it's just about whether you choose to escape from that pain or not. Yeah. So maybe you should buy yourself a I Love Cyprus t-shirt and then wear it around for a year. And then
Yeah.
at some point,
That's a great idea.
Get a hat that says locals only.
Locals only, yeah. I'm sure they sell them here somewhere.
maybe in Greek, so that none of the non-locals know it.
Yeah. I'm only going to wear it when I'm to not offend anyone. Yeah. Lots of wisdom in that. But again,
Yeah, I mean-
like it has to click with you, right?
Yeah.
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 I mean, I don't think that you can avoid making mistakes. Just make them quickly, right? So if it's clear to you that Cyprus isn't it, I'd say get out and
Yeah.
try again, right?
Exactly.
Fingers crossed, man. New Zealand's gonna be good.
Share your experience, right? If you find the next place, I'm sure there's tons of people who are looking similarly, and we'll be grateful to know
Yeah.
where you find.
And I reckon if you could have a time machine and go back and talk to that Florian that was just still in that process of, oh, should I move out of Waldorf, right? And if you tell that guy that, hey, in the next 10 years, you'll live in Singapore and Sydney and you'll live in a bus and you'll be surfing every day and you have two young, beautiful kids and then you'll go to Cyprus and then, man, Cyprus didn't work out. that 20-year-old Florian would go like, yeah, so man, you got to go to Sydney and you got yeah, fuck man, just go to whatever's next, right? Like
yeah, that's true. I think like, you know, right now it just comes across as like this, it just days are dragging along. Not like, you know, days are passing like this, obviously with 2 kids, like every single day, but it feels like, oh God, like every day is just the same. There's nothing really exciting. But I think like if you look back, even in just like half a year, you were like, yeah, whatever. It's a short time we left, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't think of it as the like most painful time you ever had.
You'd probably laugh about it and go like, frick, man, imagine if we had have already signed up to a kindergarten and we actually stayed there for 5 years. My God, right?
Yeah, exactly. You imagine kind of like what could have gone even worse, and then that's how you paint it. I mean, it's funny, like we have so many occasions where we move from place to place, and at first we're like, you know, I think like there's almost this same thing. Like at first you're like in love, sort of, then you're annoyed by some things, and then after that, and if you've left, you always like romanticize things. You seem to like only think about the good stuff of when the time you've spent there, right? So Vicky and I, of course, in Singapore, we were annoyed by many things of living there, right? Because it was so unusual for us. We're living like in the middle of the city and on top of an MRT station. So you go down and every morning have 1,000 people coming your way in every way on their phones, not looking at you and just running into people constantly, right? And it was just so annoying at the time for me. It was funny, right? Because I'm like 1.90 almost, and all these little Asians with their phones would keep running into me. And I was looking, but I wasn't, you know, moving. And now we never think of that, or we think of it as like funny, but not as annoying. At the time, I thought it was annoying.
Yeah.
And now we think back and it's like, oh, that time in Singapore was just amazing. One of the best times we ever had, yada, 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 right? But we can think of so many things that were annoying back then. And I'm sure that's how Cyprus will be portrayed.
Nah, don't worry. I'll remind you.
Maybe not as positive.
I'll remind you.
Please do.
Can't let Cyprus be same level as Singapore, man.
No, I can't. That amazing food in Cyprus. Yeah, we'll see. I'll let you know.
All right, guys. We're like nearly on 2 hours.
Yeah.
My right bum cheek is really struggling at the moment.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
I'll tell you offline. It's something to do with that dangerous insects that fly around these beautiful lakes.
Dangerous place.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for being the guest on our inaugural episode.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It was good catching up. I'm glad this time we did it right and we actually did the catching up on the call.
Yeah. Agreed. Good chatting, guys.
Yeah. Lovis and I really want to make this podcast about, you know, talking to people that inspire, right? And I think after having watched you take all the steps you've taken the last few years, you definitely was one of the first few people that we wanted to talk to, right? And to figure out what makes you tick, what makes you think the way you think. So keep going, and then we'll have more interesting things to talk about on the next time you come on.
Thank you. Can't wait. Good luck with the podcast.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Flo. Thanks, Lovis.